Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining me here today. I'm Nick Rohn, Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I'm excited for a very special program today where we will talk about the Key Bridge and another bridge, and more generally infrastructure and how asset management can play a role before and after disaster. So this is the panel for today, and before we get to them, we just want to thank our patron members, Jacobs, Mantech, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluations, and CGI, as well as all our organizational members for help making programming like this possible. Please reach out if you're interested in working with the ALN, because we would love to add to this list, and we really do think we can bring something to every organization in the world, as this leadership and asset management thinking that we advocate for here is really applicable to every business of size, of any size, and municipality as well. And upcoming events, we have events surrounding our Nexus Book Club, and also a member event with the California Education District's use of Kahua's Project Management Information Systems approach. And with that, I'll say if you're out there watching, please send any comments, questions, or feedback to the chat. We do want this to be a lively discussion, and we're not saying we have all the answers, but so please send anything you'd like to hear more about or your thoughts. And Mike Bornero, Executive Director, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. And I want to talk with you a bit because I know this program is kind of near and dear to your heart. You're very interested in the connection between asset management solutions and disasters. I know you're trying to figure out how to make that connection. And if you want to talk a little bit about things that you think are important, maybe some of the people will want to reach out to you and say they want to engage with you on how to be able to do responses to disasters that we see coming.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Like you said, this is a special program to me and a special topic. My parents and grandparents grew up around Baltimore, and so the Key Bridge was a disaster that hit close to home. And I really believe that or something like that is, waiting for many large cities, or any cities around the country, because the infrastructure is to some degree not keeping pace with modern society's development. And I really do think that asset management and has a big picture, more holistic systems thinking approach that could potentially head off some of these, or reduce some of these risks in a really good and broad way. So I'm just hoping that, this is a discussion a year after the fact, and I hope the next one we can follow up more quickly after the next event that we want, and actually offer real-time aid to that community that's experiencing that. And that's ultimately what we want to affect. We want to improve people's lives with the proven processes and tools that exist. And you just got to connect the dots.
And if anyone's interested in talking with Nick about establishing their credentials as an expert who's able to respond to either flood type or structural disasters or whatever, which is one of the reasons why we have David Totman, who will be talking from that perspective. And we have Marty Rowland, who has a solution that he is proposing for how to address issues like the Key Bridge, how to charge a rent for the ships passing under those bridges where they need to reinforce them. And then Rich Culbertson will be talking about Fern Hallow Bridge collapse and developments that have occurred there. So first, we're going to bring on David Totman, ALN Senior Fellow, and he has his own company now. Give us a little bit about what you're doing with your company first, David.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me on board. Basically, I find myself in a career where I'm going back to my roots a bit. Waterventions, do some still some consulting, but I'm focused on actually hardware. going back to smart water management in irrigation systems. And so, yeah, it's it's a vehicle for me to really start to play with the micro world of water, if you will, as opposed to the macro. So still very much involved in water and being able to express a lifelong desire, so to speak. So.
But as a civil engineer, you're representing the American Society of Civil Engineers to the TC 251 addressing asset management.
Correct. Yes, I've held that position through multiple employers. Been part of the US tag. Coming out of the Utility Engineering Surveying Institute, representing ASCE on the US tag and reporting back between the two organizations. So yep.
And we want to emphasize that you're joining us as an ALN Senior Fellow. You're not representing the ASCE during this program.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're like Marty, we're both ASCE members, and we can speak to various things. But there's an entire institute, TRDI that's devoted to roads and transportation. There are bridge experts, in the ASCE, and so. But yeah, I can address the items of the report card and the bridge inventory and various aspects, general aspects of bridge infrastructure for sure.
Okay, and one of the interesting things, one of the most publicized activity of the American Society of Civil Engineers is the infrastructure report card that comes out every year after the presidential election, and that's about to be released in March, right?
That is correct. Yeah, it's every 4 years. The new one is March 25th. So everyone stay tuned. The 2025 infrastructure report card will be, big debut in DC on March 25th. And so then March 26th is when all the fun conversations will happen, I'm sure.
And we'll arrange through you to have yourself an appropriate person from the ASCE to join us on this program. But what we're starting this program off, the report card is an excellent foundation for discussing this. And so let's go to the right thing. I called up Marty's program. This is the one that I want. So this is the 2021 ASCE report card on bridges. You want to give us a little background?
Yeah, let's focus on that first page right there, that big C, right? So this is the 2021 report card, and it addresses multiple categories of infrastructure. This one's specifically on bridges. And the 2021 report card, we had an average national grade of a C, which, okay, that, it's a passing grade. Not fantastic, not the worst of worst, but when it comes to bridges, when you're driving over them, you kind of want a pretty decent passing grade. So C says we're still okay, but we probably have some work to do. And I'd say I'm sure you'll put the link into the chat on this PDF, and people can go through it for sure. But a couple of things, the report card. There's also the federal government has what they call the National Bridge Inventory. So the report card and the NBI kind of work hand in hand as far as like the data goes. And there are roughly 600,000 bridges in the United States, and there's a grading system. The federal government has their own specifically on bridges on basically a 0 to 9, I believe. And they rate them as structurally deficient, or what has been functionally obsolete. But the structurally deficient is what really concerns everybody, right? And those numbers are going down with investment, but of the 600,000 bridges, there's 9% in the old report card in 2017, 9%, give or take, were structurally deficient. And now we're under 8%, right? So as the executive summary shows, 7.5%, which was good, right? That's trending the right direction, that the structurally deficient are going down with some investment. But, what we saw, in this investment, they're estimating 125 billion to kind of bring all the bridges up to speed. And what we saw in the IIJA, infusion, just kind of like every other category, the IIJA added, 47 billion. Well, 47 billion is not quite 125. So there's still a structural gap, or a financial gap, in trying to fix all these bridges. And Marty will talk about that a little bit later. So, I guess kind of the important thing, we also know, by looking at all our bridges, the average age is around 67 years, and bridges have various design lives, but anywhere from 40 on. But that kind of suggests that a lot of our bridges are, beyond their useful life, so to speak, at least design life. And this particular chart from the report card kind of shows that crossover between, the good condition bridges to the fair condition bridges, right? So in roughly that 2018, you kind of see the fair overtaking the good, which is a bad trend. So, anyway, it kind of shows that we do have a financial gap. We're going to have to try and figure out new funding mechanisms. We're going to have to focus on these bridges, and just, like basic asset management principles, prioritization. You have to kind of figure out how we're going to prioritize to get the funding to the right bridge that's going to have the most, positive kind of economic impact, if you will. In that regards, the NBI, has been around for many years. Yeah.
NBI, go ahead and say the full.
I'm sorry, the National Bridge Inventory, which kind of said, that's kind of the data set that everyone goes off of, but the 600,000 bridges in the U.S. The federal government has a database, and it's still active. Just looked at the 2024 data this morning, so it's still active. And it's they're looking at changing the indexing to go from their kind of their old method, their what is it, recording and coding guide, to a new specifications guide, right? So they're looking at kind of changing how that good and fair are you come to those particular conditions. So I think there will be a renewed look at asset management in bridges, because how does the various condition criteria come into play, right? So anyway, it's
you had pointed out to us over in past reports that the word asset management is increasing in these report cards. And do you have a hope for how much it's mentioned? And can you give us a little background on that?
Well, yeah. So, so asset management, like I say, if you went back, again, report cards every 4 years, if you go back, 4 report cards, not a single mention of asset management anywhere. 3 report cards that started to trickle in. 2 report cards ago, the number started growing. Last year, the last report card in 2021, I think we were up to, asset management being mentioned 34 times, which was awesome, but still not a single mention of an asset management plan or strategic asset management plan. So the concept of an AMP or a SAMP is just not there yet.
We're hoping it is this year, though.
This report card is highly guarded, secret, for eyes, certain eyes only. Again, so March 26th, we'll all have a free copy of the report card and start going through that thing. And I'll update my statistics on asset management. Yeah, it's the 2025 report card we're anxiously awaiting. We should see effects of the IIJA funding somewhat, but it's still, it's a long cycle. So, we'll see what the 25 report card looks like. But all that being said, and the topic of focus in Pennsylvania in bridges, unfortunately, Pennsylvania was one of the, I think, in the top 6 with the number of structurally deficient bridges. It's like 18% of the Pennsylvania bridges in the entire state, which is over 4,000 bridges, 18% or so are structurally deficient. And that's a worrying trend, kind of twice the national average. So, work to be done in Pennsylvania. Again, it comes to funding, it comes to resources. And so,
We'll bring Rich on a little
yeah,
bit later and the two of you can engage, but I would like Marty to come on and you two ASCE colleagues can talk a little bit before Marty explains his approach to devising an economic
yep,
solution.
by all means.
Hi, Marty. You might be muted. Let's see.
I think he dropped off again.
Yeah, he just dropped off, Mike.
Technical
So perfect. We will bring Rich in to talk about Pennsylvania. Oh, there's another Marty. I put the wrong Marty in as a panelist. Marty Rowland is. All right, so Nick,
Got it.
please.
I got it.
Okay.
So you want me to go?
Yeah, can you turn your camera on, Marty?
Let's see. I don't see
There's a little video.
I had to invite him. He'll have to re-return. This is
Well, let's just talk then, Marty.
Oh, wait. Here I am.
Yeah, thank you. So you heard what was being said by David?
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, we're good now, Marty. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Appreciate it. Dave did a great job to introduce this topic. I'm hoping that the recording of this could be made available and maybe get out to the media before the 25th date and the report card, because I think
Yeah, it's great that you brought this up ahead of time, Marty, and alerted to the work you have done to calculate a economic method to charging what you call rent to the ships that pass under bridges.
yeah,
And they need to contribute to the fact that those bridges are there so that they can do their work. And we need to improve the protection of the bridges, specifically the pilings. So the same disaster that happened at the Key Bridge is not repeated. And
yeah.
you've got some information about how many of these bridges there are. Let me pull that up.
Okay. Well, yeah, just to introduce the two slides I have here. We have the every 4-year report card, and I think Dave will vouch for this, that it's just full of, well, I hope we can find the money to do this or that and the other. And what I'm showing here is that there is a solution. And I guess I do need to preface the fact that, yeah, I am a civil engineer, but I've been trained as a political economist, environmental economist. I belong to an organization. I'm on the board of the Henry George School of Social Science. So some people,
Yeah, Marty, you didn't train, you got your PhD. That's a
yeah,
little bit different than training. So, yeah.
yeah, my PhD is in essentially infrastructure and water management uh, in the University of New Orleans. But I wanted to explain that the concept of rent owes the involvement of Henry George 140 years ago,
All right, then I'm gonna take this off until we get to that.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just we can bring that up in a minute or two. But the idea is that you know, as firms or people use a resource, the more they use it and the more they profit from it, the more they owe to the benefit of that happening. Uh, so that was the idea. And if one way that you might put your mind around it is that if you were a landlord and you had rented your house for two people, and you come over to collect the rent, and there's 20 people living there, doing a lot more damage than two people would. So naturally, you would want more rent. And similar to what we're going to see here in a second, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, the size of the ships that were using the bridge in 1977 were 1/3 the size of the dolly that eventually hit the pier and brought it down. So that's what this first slide is showing. The size of ships is measured by 20-foot equivalent units, and that's the size of a container, which is 20 foot by 8.5 by 8. So that's how they measure things. But if you look at how the size of cargo ships have increased since 1969, you start out with the 1,530, well, the 1,530 TEUs. Then you go all the way up to today. We're talking about, let's see, the size is 24,346. So I put that into the weight category. So you can see in 1977, when Francis Scott Key Bridge opened, you were talking about 3,000 or so TEUs. 1980, there's a measurement. The dolly is like 3 times larger. And the weight that hit the bridge at that critical pier, it was 116,851. That's not the largest ship. As you can see, if a larger ship hit it, it would be close to double. So there's an increasing danger to these bridges. And let's say society and the people around Baltimore are owed money by these shipping private firms because they're taking a risk that they're not paying for, and the society in Baltimore is actually paying for it. So that's the idea behind the where we get to explaining the concept. So what I did, I looked at the shipping data for the port, and I added it all up. And what you see on the 74.3, that's the millions of tons of cargo going in and out of the bridge between 1980 and 2000. And then between 2000 and 2020, you got 214. So there's a lot of traffic. So I had to, well, first I had to adjust the data because I was using this to come up with what would be a proper bridge rent to pay for the eventual hardening or improvement of the protection system. So 28% of the total tonnage in Baltimore is general cargo, and these are all less than the 3,000 TEO. So those are not a threat to the bridge. The 2/3 of the remaining we're looking at the ships that are greater than 3,000. So I took the data, reduced it because it wouldn't be fair for a cargo ship that's not threatening the bridge. So it's like focusing on the ones that are larger than the bridge was designed to handle. So I did have to interpolate some of the data, but I did it on the low end. So I feel this is a fair assumption of what the tonnages were that we could reasonably assess a rent for the use. So if you go from 1980 to 2000, if you use just that period of time and people were smart enough in 2000 to say, you know, let's put in that $92 million improvement on the bridge so that in the future, when the dolly hits it, it would still be standing. Well, that turned out to be like $1.20 ton rent that you would have had to pay starting in 1980. So then when you go up to 2020, for example, you're adding another 214.6 million tons of traffic. And if you include all those, the rent that you would have had to pay for the $92 million improvement to protect it against the dolly, you're bringing the cost per ton down to like 32 cents. So a ship the size of the dolly, they would be paying, for example, like $35,000 for passage, which for the amount of money that they're making is really kind of like a drop in the bucket. But that's a mechanism for paying for the I'd say the overuse of the bridge. And I think for the 600,000 bridges that are out there, I could guarantee that there's got to be at least one bridge that this funding mechanism could work for.
Marty, I've got to just thank you so much for making that simple and clear. Chris Golly threw in a comment saying, yes, of course, companies should be paying for the infrastructure that supports them. It's not just the tolls for the cars going over the bridge, but of course it's the toll for the ships going under them. And it's simple the way you present it. So really appreciate that. And that's a perfect lead into Rich, which Rich lives in Pennsylvania near no, don't go away, Marty. Don't go away. We want to have a discussion on this. Rich, we'll get.
I was just going to add one thing there, Mike. You know, Marty's concept of a rent, it's not, you know, a foreign concept per se. I mean, I think there's proof that it's starting, you know, that sort of philosophy is working in that you know, like Oregon, you know, there's like 4 states, there's like 16 pilot states, but 4 states, and it all kind of started with Oregon and their usage tax on their roads, right? And there's various pilot programs amongst a handful of states that are charging, you know, kind of increase, instead of just a fuel tax, it's a usage tax, right? So kind of the number of miles, and to Marty's point, there's usage over the bridge, on the bridge, as well as under the bridge, right? So we just have to rethink our funding mechanism, and it's kind of, you know, pay for what you use, right? And so drivers that don't, you know, drive a lot, you know, would probably have a less tax, obviously, but it's kind of in that asset management principle of almost like a service level agreement, right? Is that asset, you know, is providing a service, and one should pay for, you know, the benefits of that asset, right? So again, what Marty's talking about is not, it's not, you know, it's got merit, right? It's something we should look at and educate people on how to, you know, generate these new funding sources.
And we'll bring in Rich to talk more about the disastrous effect that happens when you don't properly fund asset management for bridges. Rich?
Yes. On January 28th, 2022, the Fern Hallow Bridge fell. Now, it wasn't a surprise for those who knew what was going on. The city of Pittsburgh certainly knew the bridge was in poor condition. but at the time, apparently poor was okay. The problem, however, of course, is that when the NTSB looked at this, it said, well, this bridge should have been shut down 10 years
Rich,
prior.
National Transportation Board. We can't use acronyms. We got to say it all out.
National Transportation Board. Okay, and they now they look at all accidents, whether it be trains or planes or roads. And so they looked at this bridge and they determined that this bridge should have been shut down 10 years prior. So the city knew about it. So when it did fall down, luckily for the city of Pittsburgh, that Joe Biden was in town. Joe Biden looked at the fallen bridge. He said, "Don't worry about it. The U.S. government will pay for it." And so, under a certain act, it was granted that the city of Pittsburgh would receive $23.5 million to repair that bridge. And in fact, it was restored and replaced in a year and a half. Fabulous work on those who were able to get that bridge up. But the fact is that did Pittsburgh learn the wrong lesson? The way you get federal funds perhaps is to have bridge fall as opposed to maintain them. Also, thereafter that, what occurred was that the city of Pittsburgh, there was a law that says those who were harmed in the aggregate would only get $500,000. So those who were harmed, who got injured, they about 6 of them split $500,000, even though one of those persons had a broken back. No one died. But the fact is, it showed that this was a government problem. Government knew about it. Government didn't do about it. And in fact, the city of Pittsburgh did not pay what they probably should have paid as a result of those omissions.
And this article that you shared with us that was in the newsletter this week shows that the liability limitation at $500,000.
Yeah, it's $500,000 per incident for a particular municipality or city.
What that
Now that
does,
seems low because it is low.
it encourages lack of asset management. There is no consequence. And it's
That's right. As I said, sometimes people can learn the wrong lesson.
Yeah.
That progress occurs by failing first, but at the same time putting other people's lives in danger.
That's sad.
And not just their lives, but like you said, the person with the broken back gets 1/6 of $500,000. That might not even begin to start addressing the therapy and assistance that person needs for the rest of their life.
And misery in life, and that again, that's not a lot of money.
That is the wrong legislation, and Marty is suggesting the proper type of asset management based legislation.
Well, the main thing with asset management is one, to establish objectives, then establish internal controls and such to meet those objectives. But if you don't at first understand what you're doing, in other words, that what you should be doing, whether it be fraud or these things, is that first of all put in place controls that you recognize what you want to do, you detect what defaults or whatever, then you also put correction in there. And so all those things have to merge together to where when you have goals, you put in place controls, you put in place detection of the violation of those controls, and then you also put in punitive actions to correct those things. And that's a continuous process. But if those things are not in place, bridges fall down.
Yeah, I did have something to say about that. If you can imagine a bridge that goes to an island, and that's your only way in and out, the value of the land in that island will drastically go down when the bridge collapses. So an equitable way of funding the bridge or maintaining it would be to assess a land value tax on the island, because that's how the value is calculated.
And David, you had talked about these programs in 4 pilot states. If you want to join, we can get to discussion about proper asset management policies that can begin to start addressing the huge deferred maintenance costs we have on our bridges.
Well, yeah, from a policy, I guess, perspective, it goes back to our, our public infrastructure. We've always kind of deemed, part of, oh, well, I pay taxes, I should get all this public infrastructure for, free, so to speak. I'm already paying for it. And trying to understand that all infrastructure does fatigue over time. It's a function of usage. It's a function of value, as Marty is kind of talking about there. So again, these asset management principles that drive policy and understanding the ultimate customer, right, should be paying an equitable amount, a fair amount for the usage of these various public infrastructures. And so we just have to rethink, I think how we look at public infrastructure, because for so long it was just a government thing, right? They just paid for it and you were going to use it. It's free to the public. But we all know, nothing is free, especially as we look at fatiguing assets. We've got to figure out how to, do the funding. So these pilot states that are implementing these programs, they're having, I won't know if it's, say resounding success, but they've gotten, there's some progress being made. So I'm assuming these pilot states will grow. Some are targeting, kind of the automotive industry, the kind of consumer, and others are targeting the commercial trucking specifically, right? So, we have to kind of take a look at both. That we know, kind of, I put in the chat about bridge design, Chris asked, we are getting better at design. We better understand dynamic loading. We better understand the impact of the commercial vehicles, but even they're responding in turn. They're trying to save fuel costs, but they're trying to build lighter trucks, which then actually helps us, on the bridges. So it's we've talked about this before, Mike, with system of systems approach. And that's clearly what asset management is, from a policy perspective, understanding cause and effect, is what we need to bring to the table.
And
Well, this Rich. So sometimes they're just some simple things. Is that under the bridge itself? First of all, bridges and water freezes on the bridge faster than it does on other lands.
Right.
So for this 400-foot bridge, they put a lot of salt on that bridge in the winter, but they didn't control the water. So what they had was salt water dripping down over the girders and such and the beams of that bridge. So over a period, those beams rusted. And that rusted continued. Now, if they have controlled the water properly, this wouldn't have happened. But they didn't pay attention to the water, didn't pay attention what they were putting on the bridge to create salt water, and it wasn't addressed. And ultimately, in things weren't addressed, the ultimate happened, and the bridge fell.
So Rich used the word objective, and David said level of service. So I think those are aligned terms, and I think that is where much of this starts, is agreeing on what Rich was just saying. We don't want our bridges to have salt water going down the girders.
And that's a control, obviously, that should have been in place.
Right.
Bridges don't need salt water. So what do you do about it? Is a control in place, yes or no? If the answer is no, then correct it.
Yeah.
And that would have been an easy fix at that time, throughout the years.
Yeah, I guess it's got to be somebody's job to do, and I guess that's kind of referring to what David's talking about. Is that people think that well, government created it and we just use it. So it's much more than that. It's kind of like a community responsibility.
And there were commonalities in these bridge failures. It was known. It was somebody's job. Somebody did go and inspect and said something needed to happen. Nothing happened. It was known at Key Bridge that reinforcement was needed around the piers. And now it comes to something that Jim Dieter has said, and it just super clarified things for me. Our bridges are not falling down because we don't know how to maintain bridges. Our bridges are falling down because our leaders are not marshaling the will of the people to do the hard work of maintaining bridges. Do either any of you want to comment on that?
Well, I think that was good insight. I think we could go back into the universities where I went to the University of Michigan, got my civil engineering degree, and I never really took any public administration courses, learning about political things or how to be a politician. I think civil engineers should be more conscious of, maybe my career should be in Congress. But until the universities do something like that, I think we're going to have to rely on people who are slick talkers.
Well, and Mike, and watching the chat, and kind of as Chris is bringing up, that is one of the missions of the American Society of Civil Engineers is, the maintenance side, right? So part of the system of systems thinking, he said no one likes ice on a bridge, but there are different ways of fighting ice versus salts versus magnesium chloride slurries and such. Each have their pros and cons, right? But it's the bridge engineer needs to understand, they need to think life cycle, the operations and maintenance part of the bridge, and not just say, well, I used good steel, it's structurally sound, but how about the maintenance of that thing over the decades, right? So ASCE, again, American Society of Civil Engineers, is really pushing in curriculum, in academia, in the universities, that civil engineers, if you're a design engineer, and no matter what infrastructure, you need to start thinking about, holistic whole life asset, life cycle management, right? It's your job is not just to design the best structurally sound, thing. It's to understand how that thing is going to be maintained over the next 100 years, right? And so I do applaud academia in trying to reset, someone's thinking that it is this connective tissue through the entire life cycle that they need to think about, and it's not, they just can't have their blinders on design only.
The thing of it is, when I was in first grade, I used to sing London Bridge is Falling Down. When I knew that from that song, since first grade, that the bridges will fall down. London Bridge didn't fall down. It was deconstructed and put in Lake Havasu, Arizona. That's where it is today. It was a rock bridge. And so maybe the song which came out before that, the other London Bridge was created, that put enough emphasis in the minds of the English. You better make a good bridge, and they made it out of stone. So that should have been known long ago.
A new song, Asset Management Fixes Bridges.
More ways than one.
Well, this has been a lively conversation. I want to let all of you have one more closing comment, if you would like. I really appreciate the focus on this. Clearly, bridges are not the only asset that are experiencing deferred maintenance issues, but it's good to look at this one. So, Rich, any closing comments?
Yeah, this is very complex because you also have various responsibilities. You have the federal government has major responsibility on their bridges within federal roads. The same with state, the same as municipality. And so these things are owned by multiple people, and it's a lot of times where you have diffused responsibility, sometimes you have no responsibility. And so, but this is not a big problem not to understand, but also it should not be that big a problem to solve and make sure that you have bridges that in fact don't fall.
Marty?
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind is, for example, the Francis Scott Key Bridge repair, I think it's going to come to about $2 billion, and it's going to be done in 2026, I think. So, they could institute a bridge rent right now, collect the money to reimburse the taxpayers. Somebody in Idaho is probably going to be paying for this bridge just through its taxes. So I think they should, consider the solution that I'm offering today. But there's other challenges within society where harms are being created, and the people creating the harms are not paying. You could go out to the introduction of high fructose corn syrup, for example, in soft drinks. Who made that decision? And maybe there should be a rent paid on how much that we're consuming. But that's getting off topic a little bit. But if you think about it, there's ways of financing things where harms are introduced.
Yes, thank you for taking the time to put together your concept and sharing it with us. That's very much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks.
David?
Yeah, final comments, I guess, would be, the report card, we had the one category bridges. There's dozen plus more categories. And so it's like insert infrastructure of choice. And the principles are all the same because we have, aging infrastructure across all categories. And to a bit of Rich's point too on those 600,000 bridges in the US, think of it, this is not just a federal problem. Roughly half and half, 50% Fed, 50% state and local, right? And so, the challenge with public infrastructure at the state and municipal level, it's typically been like a public works thing. And public works they don't really have like utility rates, that come in. They base off of taxes and mill levies, and that's back to the kind of the fixed income, and no one likes more raised taxes. And so, again, the funding mechanism, but I just wanted to make a point that this is not just bridges. It's obviously many categories, and it's not just a federal problem. It's a federal, state, and local, right? And so, again, back to the systems of systems thinking on all aspects of the problem.
Well, to that point, I will applaud the Michigan Infrastructure Council, which was created after the Flint, Michigan disaster with their the lead in their water system. And now it is starting to do a program of education and focus. Minnesota has copied the approach, and we know Maine and Alaska are looking at it also. So a state infrastructure council is a real good way to start providing education, because in addition to money, education is going to be crucial to all of this. Thank you, Nick, for putting the link there. So Nick, if you want to come in and close out the show.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And thanks to everyone who participated or just stuck around with us to the end here. And a special thank you to our panelists for keeping this lively discussion going and sharing some really actually useful options, solutions for these really big, hard to grapple with problems. So thanks again. And thanks to our patron members for helping make this sort of programming possible, and also our organizational members. And please reach out, because we would like to partner with just about every organization in the world and really think that this sort of thinking can bring some value. And we hope to see you again soon. We have some upcoming events related to our book club and some upcoming events through our members. Mike, there was one more member event that I don't have listed here, but it's evading me.
It turned out that not Mantech, Kahua was having a federal program April 8th. It's a invite only, and I told people there would be a chance to get information about registry, but I didn't realize it was invite only. So now I feel even more special for being able to present to Kahua's federal program. And thank you, Nick. Thanks to everyone, and we'll see you next week. We got Jim Dieter. That's going to be, I'm looking forward to that program. And thank you to
Thank you all.
the other Marty Rowland who joined us. Sorry for.
That was Sean Hagan, a colleague of mine from AST.
You gave him your login, and so he
Yeah.
came up on as Marty Rowland. Because when Sean turned on his camera, I was like, Marty shaved and wasn't his hair and what's going on here?
No, you just had Sean Hagan sitting here panicking, thought of about having to speak without any slides. So,
Well, thank you for joining us, and thanks to everyone. We'll see you next week.
great.
Bye.
Bye now.